I was reading to Matt and Tim, Tim's asleep right now. That's what happens when I read to him or talk to him. He's awake now. But I was reading to them this week a story out of Aunt Vera's bedtime stories. And this is this lady out in Arizona, her and her husband, they take care of all these kids who are orphans. And this particular account that she told, which are true accounts, she told of a little girl who was part of 50 girls, and it was Christmas time. And this little girl was asked what she wanted for Christmas, and she said, I want to be able to give all the other girls a gift. And Aunt Vera said, well, I don't know how that could happen. But she said, that's what I'm praying for God to make me able to do, is to give all the other girls a gift. And so that's what she continued to pray for. Even as all the gifts were brought on that Christmas day, she still was holding fast to that faith that God would give her the ability to give the other girls a gift. So they started opening the gifts, and each girl got a doll, one doll. It got to her because she waited to see what everybody else got, and still she had faith. God is going to give me the ability to give all these girls a gift. She opened her box, which was virtually the same size as all the others, and inside that box was 50 combs. Somehow her gift, they found her original gift. It was a doll that was back, but somehow it had gotten switched, and they had given her something. Somebody had shipped some combs to the girls, and it got wrapped up, and it got given to her. So now she could give each girl a comb for Christmas. Simple faith in God. She was seeing with her eyes of faith things that other people were very much doubting. There's no way that's going to happen, but in her heart, God had given her different eyes to count on God to provide what she was so desiring to do. Well, let me give you a third thing this morning. Not just that there's no rest for the man of sin, and that at some point in your life, you're going to be confronted with God's claim upon your life. But the third thing is, whenever that point of confrontation happens, at that, your decision at that confrontation will ultimately shape your destiny. Your decision at that point of confrontation will ultimately shape your destiny. And as you look at yourself today, you look at the lives of other folks, maybe you can see that definitely happened. You see, Jacob was not told anything that had not been told to his father and to his grandfather. It hadn't been told anything he hadn't heard before. Just all of a sudden he had different ears. All of a sudden he was hearing it with a different heart. And it went down to a deeper level. And out of that, all of a sudden he was ready to respond to God. And you may have spent a lot of years in church hearing the same thing over and over. Why they keep talking about the same thing. Every Easter and every Christmas when I come here, it's the same sermons that they preach. Why don't they give us something new? Well, all of a sudden, you may hear it with different ears. Jesus said, for those who have ears to hear. And the problem is not what you're hearing over and over, but you've never heard it to the level of your heart. It says, Jacob awoke from his sleep, and he said this. He said, surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. He was afraid and said, how awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God and the gate of heaven. I spent a lot of years in church. But one day, one season of days, of Sundays, God woke me up. And all of a sudden I looked around and said, I didn't realize where I was. I did not know that God was in this place. Because I spent a lot of years just going through the mechanics of religion. Until one day God got a hold of my heart. And I recognized, surely God is in this place. God is speaking to me. God is using the ministries that are here to change me. All of a sudden, the place was different. Jacob didn't wake up somewhere different than he fell asleep. He woke up in the same place, but he was different. And he said, how awesome is this place? We had ice everywhere in Tulsa, and they don't know how to clear parking. They don't have the snow machines. All they do is throw a little sand on top of it, and hopefully it'll help you out. So there was ice everywhere. And down there, they don't necessarily get snow. They get ice. And parking lots were just covered with ice. And we got stuck a few different times. We went to see Tom Hanks in Castaway, where he got abandoned on this island. Well, we got abandoned in the parking, or trying to exit. We couldn't get out. And we got all the way to the front, and tires were spinning. I had Josh, Katie, and Shiloh with me, and I told them to get out and to push. I knew they couldn't push the van, but I figured if Katie got out there, she'd draw somebody. And a whole carload of teenage boys jumped out and came over there and started pushing. So we got out of that. And a late night, I went to take something back to a store, and this parking lot was empty. And as I was leaving the store, I noticed that this truck that was just huge. It had a full-size bed, and then it had the seat behind the normal seat, big enough where you had a full-size door. So you had two doors on the side. It was this huge truck, and he was spinning around. And I thought, I wonder if this van would do that. So he left, and I went for that part of the parking lot, which was just wide open. And I hit the brakes, and I kind of fishtailed and said, that ain't good enough. So I hit the gas, and we started going, whoa, just around and around. I can imagine what a 15-passenger van spinning around in a parking lot would look like. But it was so much fun. When I came in, I just kind of crept apart it. But then coming back, it was like, how awesome is this place? How much joy did I just kind of creep over coming in? And maybe you haven't figured out how fun the house of God can really be. When Jesus is in charge of your heart, leading your life, and you come here and you can truly worship Him, it's not just kind of, I got a requirement to be there this Sunday, and if nobody has the sniffles, I know if somebody has the sniffles, all of us are going to have to stay home and wipe his nose. You got all these excuses, but then you figure out that God is fun, that being a Christian is a joy, and it is hard to keep you away from the things of God. And Jacob figures that out. Verse 18, it says, Jacob rose early in the morning, took the stone that he had put under his head and set it up as a pillar. And then it says he poured oil on top of it. In their mind, pouring oil on something was a demonstration that they were pouring out their life upon this. He took that hard stone that had caused him so much discomfort and took it and made it an altar. And when you have really connected with God and figured God out, when you can go to the hardest thing you've had in life and say, God, thank you. I can see that you could even use that in my life. And you may have a bitterness in your life over something somewhere in your life. And you can thank God for a lot of things, but don't even talk about that. When you've arrived, when you can go back to things that may have hurt you, may have harmed you, may have been difficult, and you can say, God, you can take even something like that. All things work together for good to those who love God. You can take that and I can make it an altar in my life. I can honor you out of that and say thank you for that. That is the power and sovereignty of who God is. The things that we think hurt us the most, He can use even for our best. And Jacob took that. He called the name of that place Bethel, which is house of God. However, previously the name of the city had been Luz. And he made a vow saying this, if God will keep me, and what he's really saying is since God, since all these things are true and God has made these promises, since God will keep me and will keep me on this journey, will be with me and keep me on this journey that I take, and will give me food to eat and garments to wear, and I return to my father's house in safety, then the Lord will be my God. If all these things are true, if this book is true, is there any other conclusion to come to than that God has the right to be God over my life? That's what he's saying. If all these things are true, then the natural response that I should have is to give God the proper position in my life. And I can't imagine why people can come in contact with the truth of Scripture, how Christ died for them, how God has a plan for their life, and say, no, I'm going to take a different road, going to choose a different option. I don't see how they can make that choice if they understand who God truly is and what He wants to do. And he says, and I return to my father's house in safety, and the Lord will be my God. This stone which I have set up as a pillar will be God's house, and all that I give you, all that you give me, I will surely give a tenth to you. You see, they didn't have this way of dividing life that we have in America today, where I am here, my money is here. Whenever they talked about themselves, it encompassed everything about themselves. That's why we preach with regard to stewardship, that 100% of it belongs to God. We have to preach that. They didn't have to preach that because they understood it. And he said, of all that you give to me, I will give back to you a tenth. He's recognizing that everything comes from God and that God is honored by every part of his life, and material is certainly one part. Now, where does this end of a year find you as you contemplate how maybe God has connected with you, confronted with you, the claim that he has on your life? And maybe you have said, no God, no God. And God, let me assure you that you don't have the promise. I don't find it anywhere in the Scripture that you have been promised this entire next year. If we come to the end of this year, you're pretty safe that you're going to make it through this entire year. There's no promise in Scripture that says you have this next month. My mom told me a story that she had heard, and I found the tape. She had the tape, and I listened to it on the tape. And I listened to a Methodist pastor tell a story of something that happened last January on an airline flight that went down and every life was lost. It was last January, January 30th of the year 2000. This Alaskan Airlines flight 261, I think it was. The internet has the account on it as far as the logging of what was said between the tower and between the pilot. But what happened was this plane went into a tumbling and looked like it was going down. But for some reason they cannot explain, it leveled out again for 9 minutes. And the tower was in contact with the pilot, who the thing was leveled. The pilot was saying, I don't understand how it got leveled, but we're level again. And the pilot was trying to deal with things, but the mic was still on. And the tower could hear in the background the voice of a woman. And this woman was talking to the passengers, about 90 passengers that were there on that airplane. This woman was the wife of a pastor in Washington State. And she was sharing with them, they could hear her talking. She was sharing with them the plan of salvation. And she took about 9 minutes to do it. At the end of the 9 minutes, she shared with them an offer to respond. And not much longer after that, the plane went into turmoil again and went on into the ocean. Everybody's life was lost. Now, what has God done to confront you with the opportunity to get your life right before Him? For those pastors on that plane, God gave them 9 more minutes to respond to the hope of salvation. Now, what has God given you, and how have you responded? Now, I don't see how those people who eventually died that maybe didn't receive Christ, even in that crisis moment, are going to really look into the face of God and say, you just didn't give me enough chances. And how much of a chance has God given you as He's confronted you over and over with the need? Let's truly get serious about God. If God is God, then I owe Him everything. There is nothing I should hold back from Him. Joshua said it in the book of Joshua. At the end of that book, as he was dying, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. If God is not God, then then we go any direction we want to go. But if God is God, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord.